Questions directed to Ming as a member of the cabinet. So we don't have an obsession also just to say about what Tommy Thomas said earlier about the manifesto, but it is actually the only document we have to understand the views and policies of this new government. So the question here is, what roles are the GLCs going to play going forward? Right now from the manifesto, the only thing we can understand from it is that PH intends for management buyouts of these GLCs to increase Bumiputra equity. That's really only the thing we can really draw majorly from it at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll answer a couple of questions together, starting with the last one, Alan, on the role of the GLCs. If you look at the text of the manifesto, you'll be able to see that it's not just about management buyouts for the Bumiputra community, but we also pointed very specifically to two other issues. The first issue is the fact that GLCs in the past have been abused. 1MDB, if you want to call it a GLC, is of course the prime example. But there have been others such as Felda, Tabung Haji and others as well, where there's been a lot of cloud of suspicion that has arose in regards to some of their internal governance processes. So one of the important things that we want to do under the new government is to improve governance standards across all GLCs. And I think that's something that's probably not controversial. The other issue that we want to encourage is to have GLCs not compete directly with the private sector in more and more areas. So I think my colleague in Parliament, YB Liu Chintong, has always been talking about how government is in the business of property development or is in the business of providing healthcare, in competition with some of the GLCs, which are government owned or government controlled. So I think these kinds of competition can lead to potential conflict of interest, within the government itself, and these kinds of conflicts of interest should be reduced as part and parcel of the larger governance process. In terms of BN, SC, and also I think the specific question perhaps, the GLCs that have been placed under the Prime Minister, does that mean that the Ministry of Finance role is decreased? If you look at, for example, the ownership of Khazanah, as far as I know, it is still MOF Inc. company, right? So, in terms of jurisdiction, it is still very much linked to MOF. The role of the Prime Minister has always been as the chairman of Khazanah. It's just that in the past, the chairman, the finance minister usually would have a seat at the table. In the past, the finance minister and the prime minister have been the same person. So this issue never arose. But I think moving forward, we do need to have more clarity on this reporting structure so that some of the issues that you talked about can be addressed, especially from a governance perspective. Similarly, for Bank Negara and Securities Commission, in the sense that they table their reports to Parliament. All statutory companies table reports to Parliament. Entities such as Suhakam, which are created by acts of Parliament, table reports to Parliament. So I think as part and parcel of the larger parliamentary reform agenda, these statutory bodies also should report to the select committees as and when they are established, so that we can have proper accountability in ways which I think somebody mentioned. If let's say you wanted to call up the CEO of Facebook, in this case you may want to call up the chairman of the governor of the Bank Negara even to report to Parliament, something which has not been done before in the context of these select committees. That can be done. So this is part and parcel of the reform agenda that we are committed to.
Thank you, YB. And Sharil?
I think if I have an opportunity to sort of close my remarks, what I would just add to whatever we discussed is the one thing we haven't really talked about today is economic reforms. We've talked about institutional, in terms of democratic institutional reforms. I think that was the flavor of the topic. But I would really hope that both government and civil society start thinking closely about clearly what do we want to do with our economy in the coming decades, in the next term as well. Khazanah has been bandied about as a topic of discussion. What's it going to be like in the next few years? Is it going to go on the same kind of path that it has over the past 5 to 10 years, which I would argue actually is more positive than not? is it going to, this MBO thing around GLCs, is that going to mean that certain favorite sons get equity or take over certain companies, not unlike what happened in the 80s and 90s? So I think this area, this sphere, and YB on Kian Ming will be most close to it in our panel. We need to really be careful about what happens to our economy, because if we don't manage it well, it's all good and well talking about democratic reforms, but the good steps that I think have happened over the past decade around how we manage state economy can be reversed and actually not lead to good outcomes. So anyway, that's one thing I just wanted to add.